What's happening, gang? Back live in the secret stash, tracking down some important local people, talking about important local things. And man, I think we did a good job fitting the bill today. Joel Incorvaia of Incorvaia and Associates. You can check him out over at incorlaw.com. Joel's been at this for 36 years, man. And he's seen just about everything, including a Jerry Springer episode, which he was actually a panelist on, and all the good potpourri in between. But specifically, of course, we're talking about inside the throes of a real estate transaction. There's a couple themes that seem to be percolating up towards the top consistently, and you want to be in front of those things as a seller. We talked about this on the first segment. So maybe if there's a summary of some of the insights that I had today, make sure that you perform your own room-by-room review. Like, for example, when I'm meeting a seller for the first time, we walk through the house and we go through it, like literally room by room. And it's not to try to, make them feel bad about the condition of what's going on. It's because that's what they're hiring me for, right? So as you said it a second ago, separating the emotion from the truth, because their goal is top dollar. And if they want to get top dollar, they have to look past the fact that it's their home and see it through the eyes of the buyer. Same thing applies when you're filling out those seller disclosures. Just because it wasn't a big deal for you doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be a big deal for the buyer, right? So don't think that for them. Would you not agree?
Absolutely. I think you have to be proactive. That's my advice, is don't wait until you have an offer to purchase a property to be thinking about your disclosure obligations. Yeah. The minute you decide to sell the home and you sign a listing agreement, you should already be starting to fill out those forms. And what most people want to do is just rush through it. This is just part of the process to just answer really quick.
It's,
and they don't
it's
think
two
about
forms within 50.
Right.
So the goal is just to get through them before you go fall asleep that night.
Right. And so what you really have to do is think about it. And actually, if you've owned your home for a long time, obviously the longer you've owned a property, then the more there is that you might want to disclose or have to disclose. Think back to what happened 15 years ago when you first bought it. Or, for example, the house I live in, we had for some reason, we had two flooding incidents with broken pipes within a year and a half. And the nice thing is my insurance company paid about $30,000 for a remodel of a couple of my rooms because of that. But again, 20 years ago that happened. Now, do I have to disclose that today? I should probably think about that. Like, is this something that might be important, at least to put it on a list that I give the buyer, just to make sure they know everything that's going on, everything that's happened. So these are things you have to take very seriously, because the liability you may have as a seller could be substantial. For example, that case I had in Monterey, my sellers were living in San Diego when the property was sold. And so the agent emailed them the disclosure forms, and they probably filled them out in like 25 minutes. They kind of rushed through it because they were
without even being on the property.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't even at the property at the time. They had moved out 6 months earlier. Yeah. And I think they probably could have spent and should have spent a little more time going through the forms just to make sure they hit on everything that they had to disclose. And
as there's a lot of real estate agents that listen to these shows as well. So advice that I heard you say also for them is actually filling out those two forms alongside your seller, yes or no?
Absolutely. The real estate agent should be very involved in the process, because remember that the buyer's agent has a duty to also inspect the property and has a fiduciary duty to represent the buyer to the best of his or her ability. So you need to be sitting down with your client, if possible, as long as the client's here in the same city you're living in and working in, and go through these forms and explain what they mean, because they are legal forms. They are legal forms a lot of lay people still don't understand, even though they're supposed to be simple. Right. There's a lot of complicated questions that even a professional may have difficulty correctly answering.
Yeah, well said. So, of course, I feel like this is becoming trite now, but maybe it's just trite for me because, I've been doing this as long as I have. But when in doubt, over-disclose.
Exactly.
You're probably never going to find a scenario whereby what you said is going to blow the deal up, but God forbid that you don't say something and then you end up finding yourself in hot water down the road.
Yeah, because a lot of these things are minor. The things that are kind of like borderline gray area, minor things, and I doubt that the buyer's not going to buy the property, but the problem is that little minor thing later turns into a big deal after the purchase is completed. Then the buyer is going to come after you and say, why didn't you tell me about that?
And to maybe switch the insight over to the buyer's perspective, when it comes to home inspections, It's great. First of all, make sure that you're dealing with a reputable home inspector. Don't just take the agent's word for it. Even if you trust the agent, you believe that if they have your best interests at heart, make sure you do your own diligence and try to maybe get a general contractor or someone out there just to get a second opinion before you sign off on your investigation contingencies.
I would definitely recommend that you probably have at least 2 different people look at the property to make sure that what the first person missed, the second person may find. And most of us have maybe a friend who's a contractor. It doesn't even have to be somebody you pay money to. It might be somebody who's just acquaintance and say, hey, I'll pay $200. It's well worth it when you're spending $500,000 to buy a piece of property. I'll pay $200 to go out there and just walk through the property with me and let me know if there's anything you see.
Couldn't agree with you more. And then I'd say dovetailing onto that, the specifics to condo purchases or townhomes where you're dealing with an HOA is do the deep homework. Even if that means hopping on the San Diego Superior Court website and going and pulling up the complex name and seeing if you find any historical stuff that's not going to show up in your homeowner's paperwork that you get as part of your due diligence phase, just to make sure that there's no, hanging chads in there that are dying to bite you, and also how old the complex is.
Right. And you might even do an investigation regarding the developer. Does that developer have a history of litigation? You can probably just do a Google search and find out if they have a good reputation, because some developers have a much higher reputation than others, and some seem to be prone to a lot of construction defect litigation because they don't have the same high construction standards that other builders might have.
I love that thought, and I love the fact that we got the opportunity to hang out with a man with a caliber of Joel Incorvaia in the house of Incorvaia and Associates. You can check him right over here with his Del Mar zip code, probably in Solana Beach, technically over in the Timbers off the 5. Learn more about him at incorlaw.com. That's INCOR law.com, or you can call him directly at 858-259-2220. Joel, thank you so much for coming in. Definitely left me better than how you found me, so I know that was the case with Stash Nation.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed being on the show.
You bet, gang. And for you, I want to thank also engineer Steve and my producer Adrian for making the show possible. We'll be back here next week, same bat time, same bat channel, 10 a.m., Real Talk Radio San Diego. Coming up, we got the 619 Vodka crew in the house, and we'll be talking with them a little bit later. Fair enough. Talk to you soon.